Deion Sanders, better known in the college football world as Coach Prime, is completely rewriting the way in which you win in college football. In fact, just this past weekend, he went into enemy territory down into Fort Worth, Texas, and defeated the defending national champion runner-up and currently ranked 17th TCU Horned Frogs with a team that last year went just 1-11. The irony in it is I think that you and I, as youth workers or members of the church from a staffing perspective, have things in which we can notice, learn, and observe about the way that he is doing it, and some shifts with the way that the next generation is approaching leadership. In fact, stick around to the end of this video because I'm going to drop 3 hacks in which we can shift our thinking from the old way of doing things to the new way of doing things. Welcome to the Hybrid Ministry Show. Well, hey everyone, if you and I haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Nick Clayson, youth pastor in Dallas-Fort Worth area. Sanders went in this weekend and defeated my hometown team. I'm not a TCU fan, so I was actually kind of cheering for Colorado, but I was captivated by this story because as I was watching College Game Day out on my back patio, as I love to do, they kept talking about this unprecedented way in which Sanders had built the team. And when I hear that, immediately my bells start to go off. So I did a little bit of research, and back in April, USA Today wrote this about Coach Prime and Deion Sanders' way of doing things. They said his grand experiment at Colorado has set up quite a contrast with the rest of major college football. The Colorado Buffaloes have been bringing in so many new transfer players from other colleges that it seems as though it's almost a test run for a new model of team building. It said it also tees up the big question, is Coach Prime outsmarting everyone else with his recruiting and roster strategy, or is he climbing up a slippery slope? Now you might be asking, what is Sanders' strategy? And in interviews, he's been very clear. He says it's the 40-40-20 rule. Last year, he was at HBCU Jackson State, and now he's taking that exact same approach at a much smaller college to a more national Division I power. But the thing about Colorado is they've been frankly pretty irrelevant for like around 20 years. And so Colorado is willing to put all their chips in on this new guy, especially Sanders, who has, NFL and MLB pedigree. But his 40-40-20 recruiting strategy is 40% graduate transfers, 40% undergraduate transfers, and 20% high school recruits. Now, if you're not into college football and you're not tracking with this as a youth pastor, just hang tight because I'm going to share how this actually has to relate to the rest of our recruiting strategies. But if you are in youth ministry and you're wondering, like, why does any of this matter? I want you to check out this video right here that I have linked at the top, what every youth ministry needs to be doing. And it's all part of this digital and new wave revolution for the next generations to come and beyond. Now, what this strategy is and why it's even possible is because there's old transfer rules and new transfer rules. And let me make this as clear as I can. Before 2021, if a student started at one school and wanted to go to another school, basically they had to sit out an entire full year before they were eligible to play. In 2021, they eradicated that rule. And now as a result of that, Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, is using that to his advantage. So he can take someone from another school and bring them to his school, and they can play immediately as opposed to having to sit out. It brings me like shades of the NBA super team. Drop me in the comments below if you enjoy the NBA super teams or not, right? Like, I think Miami Heat, Golden State Warriors, I've even think of like recent teams that have tried and failed, like the 76ers, the Brooklyn Nets, or the Phoenix Suns. Whatever your opinion is of this, it's new, it's different, and it goes against the grain of the old school way of recruiting. And so you, as a church leader, as a member of society, have 2 options. You can either embrace it or push it away. So let's talk about what the church implications are, because there are new ways of thinking in this, and there are 2 kind of like categories of this, right? Category number 1 is in staffing, okay? So Gen Z is our new workforce, right? Like Gen Z is in college and now they are graduating. For example, I have a brand new resident. He just graduated college and now he is with us for the next year and he's in the lane. He could have come to us for a year-long residency, or he could have just went and got any old regular job. But he is Generation Z, squarely, through and through. And so his way of thinking and his ideology and the things that matter to him are potentially different than our 60-year-old, no shade thrown senior pastor, right? The reality is our senior pastor is a boomer and our resident is in Gen Z, and in between there's Gen X, and then there's millennials, which is what I am. And so we have 4 different generations in the workforce. And so while there are biblical and theological truths that never change, the reality is there are some preferential things that are changing as the generations skew younger. And what you have to do as a leader is you have to be willing to understand that those preferential things may not be foundational theological things. So let's talk about this from a staffing perspective. I know as a member of a staff, I want to be included and attached to what is felt as and seemed as a winner, right? The place I work, I want it to feel like I'm working for a winner. And in a lot of ways, that's what's going on with Colorado. Coach Sanders is recruiting people in, and he's recruiting them to come and to win. And those kids in college, they want to win. I also know that I want to work for a church that does not resist new strategies and new technologies. Not buying into every single thing hook, line, and sinker, thinking critically, having a discerning mindset, but also being willing to embrace things that are new and being willing to rethink some old ways of doing things if in fact they are not the most efficient or most effective. Here's a age-old example, and you probably get this if you're in youth ministry. Paper Bibles versus digital Bibles. I actually read a comment last week in a Facebook group from a youth pastor who said, I have a lot of new kids, a lot of kids who are not believers, and they're not bringing their Bibles, but the scripture is on the screen. Should we force them to bring and read and open their Bibles? And almost every single comment was, yes, get them in the Word. Yes, get them in the Word. And I agree that we need to get them in the Word, but are we meeting those non-Christian students where they are? And if they're not bringing their Bibles, what's wrong with having them read Scripture on a screen? Is it not still Scripture? The printing press was not invented until 1440 AD, which means the first 1440 years of the New Testament church, nobody had their own copy of Scripture. Now we have copies of Scripture on our cell phone devices, and Gen Z uses their cell phone more than any other screen-based device combined. So why would we not encourage them to utilize Scripture on the device that they're already holding? Is it wrong for them to engage with Scripture that way? You might be thinking, well, I get so much more out of turning the pages. And yeah, you do, but that's you. You might be older, and that might be the way, and maybe even someone who's Gen Z, they do find the value in paper Bible, and that's a great thing. But there's nothing wrong with if your way of engaging with Scripture is digital. That's an example of something that I don't think is foundational, right? Scripture is foundational. That will and should never change, but the way in which we approach it may be different. Now, hey, listen, I would love to encourage you, if you are getting value out of this video, hit that like button, and I would love to encourage you to subscribe so that you get some more of these episodes. Additionally, let's talk about reaching younger generations. As a youth ministry leader, I am a youth ministry leader. I've been in youth ministry for 12 and a half years. I've seen different generations and different ways and styles in which we've reached them. If you are in youth ministry or you're a church leader, you know the challenge of trying to reach younger generations. Here's the reality. In this college football example, Deion Sanders is offering these students a place to belong, a place to be themselves, and frankly, he's approaching it from a digital perspective as opposed from the old school industrial way of doing things. What's the industrial way? What are the industrial values? Industrial values made famous by Henry Ford and the entire industrial era and revolution in the United States of America. The values are things like production, performance, and value and quantity. How much can you produce? How much can you make? How many widgets are you able to pump out through this system? It's very conveyor belty. It's very, you're a number. You're a part of this system. And in a lot of ways, think about this, the church has defaulted to numbers. How many people are in your group? How many people can you fit in your auditorium? Once it starts to get bigger, how do you pump more people in? But what the next wave of generations is thinking and wondering and asking is more digital minded. They're asking, how can I gain access to this place? Where are the access points for me to gain value? And how do I engage with this place if I truly want to? And finally, can I find real and true, authentic community? So on the other side, let's dive into the questions that you need to be asking as a ministry leader. So the questions that I want you to start asking as a ministry leader is this: how many access points do we have for outsiders to gain access to our ministry? You know, in the context I work in, we have this really terrible lobby. It's dark and ominous looking from the outside. And then when you get in, we have this big bulkhead that like lowers the light level, and then this big round wagon wheel. And the wagon wheel is not optimally set up, in my opinion, to greet guests, because our leaders behind it are invited to sit their butts on the counter and then turn their back to the higher wall. If you stand, you're kind of like too far away. If you sit, you're too low as you're looking up at people. And that's just an example of not really having an accessible option or an accessible welcome space, right? New generations are looking for access points. In new college football, they now are also allowing you to make money off of your namesake. And Sanders, Coach Prime, is using his namesake and allowing his students to come on in and find opportunity not only to have access to him, which also helps in the recruiting strategy, might I say, is that he's a famous former NFL and MLB player. But also, they're not just like looking to like get close to someone famous. They're looking to find true meaning and value out of their own college football experience. In addition, the question that I believe that we all need to be asking ourselves is, are we telling students what they need to know? Or are we telling them everything that we know, right? This is the engagement question. A lot of times what I find is that we are telling students everything we think they need to know, as opposed to what they actually need to know. And then finally, the last thing that I have for you is, are you creating biblical community, or what I call fellowship plus, which is just a really good feel-good moment? Or are we creating them to have dependence on each other and an example and a picture of Acts 2 type of church? Because frankly, that's what I think the next generation is looking for, is real, true, deep, authentic community, a place that they can call home and a place that they can engage. And that's what Coach Sanders is providing at Colorado. And that's what I believe we as ministry leaders need to be creating. And I want to let you know about our 6-part social media framework will help you start to create and get a foot into that digital moment and that digital landscape for your students. It's linked right here on this video. Click on that and we will talk to you next time. And as always, stay hybrid.